Well, hello there, and welcome to the Apartment Building Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Blank. I'm super excited that you're here. So with that, I'm going to bring in my co-host, Garrett Lynch. What's going on, Garrett?
What's going on, Michael?
So let's move on to the show today, Garrett, because we have someone who we kind of look up to. He's a very well-known author called Gino Wickman. He wrote a couple of books that is called Traction, a book called Rocket Fuel. And both of those books have sold 1 million copies each. And so we're really fortunate to have him on the show because he's got a new book out called Entrepreneurial Leap that we're going to focus on in this particular show. With that, let's get right in the interview with Gino Wickman.
You are born with the traits of an entrepreneur. They cannot be taught, and that's debatable. Half the world agrees with me and half doesn't. Number two, I believe there are 6 essential traits. And very quickly, as I share these, I want your audience and your listener to just do a little checkup on themselves and say, do I possess these 6 things? And so they are visionary, passionate, problem solver, driven, risk taker, and responsible. And so let's pretend for a moment that that is true. If you have them, odds are you're probably going to be a true and a successful entrepreneur. But now here's what's important. I'm talking about true entrepreneurs that start companies, build companies with lots of people. I created something and I write about something in the book called the entrepreneurial range. Okay, and the entrepreneurial range, if you can picture in your mind this arc, if you will, and on the far right side of that arc are the words true entrepreneur. And the far left side of that arc are the words self-employed. Well, anybody that has their own business is somewhere on that range. And when I talk about these 6 essential traits and these true entrepreneurs, I'm simply talking about the people on the right half of the range that, like I said, build businesses with lots of people. And to give you the extreme, if we go all the way and we redline the right side of that range, those are the greatest entrepreneurs of all time. Henry Ford, Walt Disney, Thomas Edison, Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, Sarah Blakely. And then now let's go all the way to the left side, that self-employed side of the spectrum. Well, these are people that are people with side hustles, freelancers, consultants. They are one-person shows, and that's okay, and that's admirable, and they are self-employed and they have their own business. And so I always like to say, if you've got handy skills and you go out and become a handyman or woman and charge $60 an hour, you will make $100,000 a year being a one-person show, and that's heaven. But what I would suggest to you is if you have these 6 traits, you will not be able to help yourself, but to ultimately become a construction company, because you're going to start doing the math and say, you know what, if I hire somebody for $25 an hour, and then you'll start doing the math, you'll add people and you'll build a business. Point is, it doesn't matter where you are on that spectrum, but I'm just telling you that if you're looking to build a business, our EOS clients are 10 to 250 person privately held companies. If you want to become one of those entrepreneurs, you really have to possess the 6 essential traits. And then the last little point is, this is a cautionary tale. I'm truly trying to help you from 10 years of misery out there, because if you don't have these traits and you're trying to build an empire, you're going to be miserable, because it is hard work.
Gino, welcome to the show today.
Glad to be here. Looking forward to this, guys.
Yeah, I'm just excited to have you because I've read all your books and implemented everything in our business. So I'm really excited about that, to have you in the show and kind of go deep, because you know entrepreneurs so much. You've been around them yourself. You've been one, but also more interestingly, you've studied them. What is it? Why are you so passionate about entrepreneurs, Gino?
I wish I could give you the perfect answer, but I believe, one of the things I urge and I teach is for everyone to find their passion. And my whole world is within the realm of entrepreneurs. So I advise that outside of the realm of entrepreneurs. But as an entrepreneur, you certainly need to find your passion. Well, my passion is entrepreneurs. And I believe almost every passion stems from a wound, for lack of a better term. And so it tends to come from suffering. And I took over a family business when I was 25. I took on a bit of a turnaround project, and the company was in deep, ugly debt. And it was 3 brutal years of digging it out of debt and turning it around. And we successfully turned it around, successfully sold it. And so I think that's a big part of it. And then I've exhibited these traits that we'll talk about. And it's always made me different, odd, so entrepreneurs are quirky and weird. And so from all of that, somewhere I had a light bulb moment at around 29 years old or 30 years old that I want to spend my life helping entrepreneurs solve that pain, bring them out of ignorance and suffering and show them that it doesn't have to be the hell that they're going through. And so that's where it all comes from.
That makes a lot of sense now. That's, maybe helps explain why you wrote the book, developed the EOS system, right? And you wrote the book Traction, and the other one, Rocket Fuel, and you've sold over 1 million copies of those books. Talk about what you do in that book, in Traction specifically, and why that helps an entrepreneur.
After the kind of the bumpy entrepreneurial ride in my 20s, and like I said, taking over the family business, turning it around, successfully selling it, I discovered this knack that I said for helping entrepreneurs. And so for the last 20 plus years now, I created a system called EOS that we brought to the world. And again, it was all stemming from that passion. But what I've been doing for 20 years is building with my partner, Don Tinney, a team of EOS implementers that help companies implement EOS, help entrepreneurs run a better business. And so these are successful businesses that we help become even more successful. They're typically a privately held 10 to 250 person organization. And so we basically built a team of EOS implementers, 375 strong around the world. Don and I decided to sell that business 2.5 years ago. I still own 12.5%. I still own all the books. I'm still the EOS guy. I still have clients. So half of my working life is still EOS. It is my love. But that's what it's all about.
This wasn't just a theory. You didn't just think of it. It didn't just pop in your head. There was a process behind this. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and why it's such a successful system and the amount of work you had to put into actually creating it using data?
Yeah, you bet. And so I love that you use the word theory, because it's definitely not theory. I cringe at the word theory. And so, everything I do is real world, time tested, and it's also very simple and practical. So through the experience in my 20s, I spent my 20s as an absolute sponge, learning from all of the greats. I was armed with 2 amazing mentors and obviously turned that business around. And so through all that, my brain has this way of seeing patterns and trends. And when I decided at 29, 30 years old, how I wanted to spend the rest of my life helping entrepreneurs, after selling the business, I threw myself into that world looking for entrepreneurs that needed help. I was a member of the Young Entrepreneurs Organization, now known as EO. I was helping a lot of my EO brethren. And so over a period of about 5 years, from like age 30 to 35 roughly, is where I ultimately put the finishing touches on what EOS is. And so what it was 5 years, 500 sessions with 50 clients, honing, testing, refining tools. I have extreme OCD, and I laid awake in bed most nights just obsessing about how can I help and what's a simpler way to do this. And I just boiled it all down to a handful of tools that have an incredible impact on an organization and help it run like a Swiss watch and free that entrepreneur up to be the visionary that they are and grow the company to the next level.
Yeah, we implemented this system at both companies, Nighthawk and then the educational side as well. And you talked about helping entrepreneurs, reduce stress and make our lives a little more enjoyable. And I think that's exactly what it does, Gary, right? I mean, it gives us a lot of structure for how we run the company.
That it's an incredible thing that you've created there. So to go along with that, you had so many data points. How did you whittle it down to like the 20 core data points that you're using now? Because that's a pretty incredible process.
Yeah. And I probably tried and tested 500 things to get it down to the 20, so it's again, it's back to OCD. And so and I also have this mind, I'm able to just simplify things. And so the reality is every time something worked really well, and then I tried it again and tried it again and tried it again, and it worked like 10 times in a row, that was a keeper. And if I had something that worked relatively well, that wasn't a keeper. And so it was just the best 20. I've always had this thing burned in my brain that there's 20 tools in the toolbox, and it's a teaching from my dad, who's an amazing teacher, trainer, speaker, motivator. And so somehow that was always burned into my brain. And so I just was obsessive about, I got to get this thing down to 20 of the most impactful tools that are going to help an entrepreneur get to the next level. And so just a whole bunch of trial and error, and this ability to be very discerning and simplify and cut out the really good stuff and just keep the great stuff.
If anyone watching, listening to this has not read Gino's book, Traction, go ahead and do that right now, especially if you're running a small or medium-sized company and you're kind of stressing out a little bit or a lot bit. This has created a lot of structure around how we run meetings, how we set goals, how we track goals, and we feel like we have a much higher degree of certainty of actually achieving those goals and keeping us sane along the way. So definitely check that out as well. Now, so you've kind of moved on a little bit. You kind of sold off that business a little bit. And I'm like, when I heard that you moved on to a new book that you were super excited about, I was like, my gosh, this man, he's got two passions. I thought we can only be passionate about one thing. So tell us about this new book. It's called Entrepreneurial Leap, which is fascinating. Why did you write this book?
Yeah, and I love that. The good news is the passion stretches over both
it really does.
Business models, if you will, because it's all about entrepreneurs. And so what happened is after, 2 to 3 decades of obsessing about entrepreneurs and helping them become successful, I decided to now go to the front end of the entrepreneurial journey and help entrepreneurs in the making take a better leap, help you start a better startup. And so there's so many great new entrepreneurs, especially coming out of a pandemic. We're going to spawn some incredible entrepreneurs. It's like the right place at the right time. And so what I'm doing is I'm teaching my 18-year-old self. There's a great quote by Daniel Kennedy that says, "We teach what we needed the most." And so, I'm looking back to the misunderstood, mislabeled, derelict entrepreneur in the making that I was, who was lost, insecure back at 18. If I would have had this content, had this information, I would have been much further ahead. Like I said, I didn't realize I was until I was 29. And again, you don't have to be 18. You can be any age, 13 to 113. But if you think you might be an entrepreneur, I created this to help you ultimately determine whether or not you are, and then how to greatly increase your odds of success.
Because when I first started reading your book, I wasn't quite sure if I agreed with you. So, because you have a very interesting theory that maybe we can banter about in just a second, but talk about how you define an entrepreneur, because you actually talk about a spectrum of entrepreneurs. Can you talk about that spectrum and kind of how you, describe an entrepreneur?
Yeah, and there's that word theory. So again, what I'm about to share stems from, it is definitely my experience and my opinion, but that's based on, again, 3 decades. We've got 100,000 companies using the EOS tools. And so a couple of things I want to say as I lead into what you're asking about the entrepreneurial range. The first very important philosophy is that I believe you are born with the traits of an entrepreneur. They cannot be taught. And that's debatable. Half the world agrees with me and half doesn't. The good news is all of the true entrepreneurs I know 100% agree with me. That's all that really matters. Anyway, there's some educators that would disagree with me. So with that said, I first and foremost believe you're born with it. Number 2, I believe there are 6 essential traits. And very quickly, as I share these, I want your audience and your listener to just do a little checkup on themselves and say, do I possess these 6 things? And so they are visionary, passionate, problem solver, driven, risk taker, and responsible. And so let's pretend for a moment that that is true. The 6 essential traits, you're born with them. If you have them, odds are you're probably going to be a true and a successful entrepreneur. But now here's what's important. I'm talking about true entrepreneurs that start companies, build companies with lots of people. Okay. And so to your point, Michael, I created something and I write about something in the book called the entrepreneurial range. Okay. And the entrepreneurial range, if you can picture in your mind this arc, if you will, and on the far right side of that arc are the words true entrepreneur, and the far left side of that arc are the words self-employed. Well, anybody that has their own business is somewhere on that range. And when I talk about these 6 essential traits and these true entrepreneurs, I'm simply talking about the people on the right half of the range that, like I said, build businesses with lots of people. And to give you the extreme, if we go all the way and we redline the right side of that range, those are the greatest entrepreneurs of all time. Henry Ford, Walt Disney, Thomas Edison, Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, Sarah Blakely. And then now let's go all the way to the left side, that self-employed side of the spectrum. Well, these are people that are people with side hustles, freelancers, consultants. They are one-person shows, and that's okay, and that's admirable. And they are self-employed, and they have their own business. And so I always like to say, if you've got handy skills and you go out and become a handyman or woman and charge $60 an hour, you will make $100,000 a year being a one-person show, and that's heaven. But what I would suggest to you is, if you have these 6 traits, you will not be able to help yourself, but to ultimately become a construction company, because you're going to start doing the math and say, you know what, if I hire somebody for $25 an hour, and then you'll start doing the math, you'll add people, and you'll build a business. Point is, it doesn't matter where you are on that spectrum, but I'm just telling you that if you're looking to build a business, our EOS clients are 10 to 250 person privately held companies. If you want to become one of those entrepreneurs, you really have to possess the 6 essential traits. And then the last little point is, this is a cautionary tale. I'm truly trying to help you from 10 years of misery out there, because if you don't have these traits and you're trying to build an empire, you're going to be miserable, because it is hard work.
When I first read this, I took the assessment and I was like, wow. I was like, I have all of these. Like I scored 100% the first time. And it was weird, because it's like I did this all on my own growing up, and I didn't even realize, like I couldn't put a word with it, right? I was just like, I just did it. So I guess I was born with these traits. My question is, based on your data and not theory, how did you come up with these specific traits as being those that an entrepreneur needs to possess?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and I appreciate that you brought up the assessment, because for anybody listening, you can go take a free assessment, e-leap.com, and find out if you score. If you score 90 or higher, you probably have these 6 essential traits like Garrett did. So where this comes from is, first and foremost, like I said, 30 years of history with entrepreneurs and working with entrepreneurs and obsessing about them. Out of that, when I was 40, I'm now 53, I said, when I turn 50, I'm going to shift my energy, and I'm devoting my energy to entrepreneurs in the making. That's what drove this book. That's why I sold the business. That's why I made this shift, where now the other half of my time is obsessing and focusing about this. So first and foremost, after 30 years, and that's putting the stake in the ground, I started to just pay attention, research, ask questions, learn. And what happened is I whittled it down to a handful of traits. It was probably something more than 6 at the time, but not many more. And then what I would do is, everything I do, like I said, no theory, is tested, honed, tried and true. So what I started to do is then share this information with those true entrepreneurs. And I started with, I can't remember the number, like I said, but I would get their feedback on which traits they feel they exhibit, which ones resonate with them. And so that went on for a couple of years. Then I whittled the list down. And when I then wrote it, I had 75 test readers for this book. I usually have about 20. So that's a big number. But for me, as long as I bet literally 1,000. So as long as I have 100% of the people say, yes, that is me, which is exactly what happened, as I would bounce these off true entrepreneurs, as my test readers read everything, it just kept proving itself over and over and over. I kept getting the nods. Certainly I looked at myself, certainly I looked at all of my clients, but it was just basically 10 years of obsessing and paying attention and watching and asking tons of questions. And so that's how I do it.
So the book is a little bit of a tough love book. It seems to me like you're trying to save someone from a lot of heartache and pain and failure by trying to be a true entrepreneur when they don't have the traits. Is that kind of what you're trying to do?
Yes, 100%. So there's no question it's a punch in the face. It's disheartening. And if you're one of those people that is lathered up about all this hype about entrepreneurs and you want to take your own leap, that's my point I make. Only 4% of the population has what it takes to be a true entrepreneur. So it's not like a career choice for everyone. And and again, I don't know how much of a debate we're going to get into this fact.
We're going to start that right now, Gino.
What's that?
We're going to start that debate right now.
Good. I love it.
Here's
my point. There are people walking the earth that actually think they can teach anyone how to be an entrepreneur. So they literally think they can teach 7.5 billion people on this planet how to be an entrepreneur. that's a crime. Okay. That's criminal. And so the point is there are 10,000 career choices out there. This is just one of them, and it is brutal. So you gotta be cut out for it. It's not this like ultimate pinnacle in life to be an entrepreneur. It's just one of a zillion career choices. And I'm just helping you try to decide if it's right for you. Now, here's the good news. If you score low, you think I'm wrong, go prove me wrong. That's the beauty. You get to ultimately decide.
I have like friends that are kind of like a one-man show, like you talked about, but they're not a true entrepreneur. What do you say to those people? Like, can they ever get there? Isn't there's not something you can tell them like, hey, just hire a few people and you could be more on that path?
No, I say to them, hallelujah. So celebrate that. I mean, you know how many one-person shows there are making $1 million a year? This is my point about be a handyman or a handy woman. You'll make $100,000 a year with no employees. Employees are tough. I mean, people are tough beings to deal with. So that's my point. Not everybody wants to have a bunch of employees. Not everybody should build an empire like that. So I say to them, hallelujah, know thyself. Relish that, let your freak flag fly and be exactly what you're here to be.
This is why understanding exactly what you mean by entrepreneur is super important, right? Because someone could watch and listen and goes, how dare he? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a one-man show, two-man, three-man show, whatever. I too am an entrepreneur. But the way you define it is quite narrow. It's entrepreneurs who are building something significant. And if you do look at it from that angle, and you look at the characteristics that you mentioned, it's hard to teach those things. It really is. At the same time, one of the reasons I love real estate is because I feel like it lowers the bar for the average entrepreneur on that spectrum. You got the one-man show on the left, and you got the 200-person company over here. And real estate falls somewhere kind of in the middle because I can build a multi-million-dollar business with 4 people. Like, I can control $90 million of real estate with 4 people. Now, is that a real entrepreneur? I don't know, right? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
Well, here's the beauty. So everything we've talked about to this point is in the first part of the book. So I wrote the book in 3 parts. And so we're about to transition to the second part. So the first part is called Confirm, and it's all about confirming that you're a true entrepreneur. And let's pretend you are. Then we go to what I call Glimpse. And then the third part is Path. As we're about to go to Glimpse, I want to first say that's what that entrepreneurial range is all about. And so understand, if you're that person that you talked about with 4 employees in the apartment investment business, amen and hallelujah to you. You're probably still on the left half of that entrepreneurial range. But listen, life ain't all bad for you. But as we go into Glimpse, there's something really important. So I love when I'm doing a podcast with an industry-specific podcast, because your audience has half the battle won. Because what I do in Glimpse, in addition to showing you countless real world stories, showing you a day in the life of an entrepreneur, both heaven and hell, and how to avoid the 8 critical mistakes, I then share with you, the entrepreneur in the making, all of your options. There are 10,000 options of businesses for you to start. And so we take you through industries, types of businesses, B2B, B2C, product business, service. Well, all of a sudden here, your audience, you already know the business you're in. Half the battle is won, as I said. So now you're going in the apartment business. Now we get to pull that entrepreneurial range into the picture, and you get to decide. If you're going to stay on the far left, listen, you'll own 10, 20, 100 units. You'll make some good money. You're fine. If you have the 6 essential traits, you are probably going to build an empire. My largest client manages 10,000 apartment units. So the sky's the limit in terms of what you can build. And it's just, if you want to be an organization that owns, invests, and manages 1, 2, 5, 10,000 units, you're going to have those traits. And I just caution you. And so you already know the industry. Now you get to decide where you are in that range, and then go, baby, go.
So you're saying there's no hope for the guy and gal getting a 74 on your assessment?
I would not no hope. What I'm saying is a 74 score, it's highly unlikely you're going to build an empire. Now, here is the other interesting thing about being in real estate. Okay. And so in my other book, Rocket Fuel, where I teach the visionary integrator concept. So a visionary is an entrepreneur. The integrator is the person that counterbalances them. What I talk about is how an organization without a visionary can only last so long. But it depends on the industry as well. And no criticism to your industry, but I talk about one of the slowest moving industries being real estate and apartment building management. And the fastest moving, let's talk about cell phones and high tech. Okay, well, if your company is in the cell phone business and you don't have a visionary, you're going to last like a week because you need to innovate weekly. With all due love and respect to the apartment business, apartment investing, things aren't changing that fast. So yes, to your point, it requires a lower level of visionary ability. So you do have a lower barrier to entry and an opportunity to go into an industry that isn't ever changing on you by the week. So if that made sense, yes.
No, it absolutely does, because I've done so many things in my life. I've done software, I've started restaurants, I've negotiated short sales, the stocks and options, all this stuff, and then flipped houses. And if all the things, if I were to start a software company, I'd be like, oh my gosh, you know how many hours I'd have to work over how many years, and then lucky if I sell it, let's say, or open up a nightclub or something like that, or like crazy stuff where you have to be innovative, you have to be super resourceful, versus real estate, which is kind of on the boring side of things, but it's, in my mind, the most replicatable business. I can literally teach someone the business. I could not teach someone how to start a software company. I don't even know where to start. There's so much gut and grit involved, right? So I almost feel like this is why I like real estate, apartments specifically. I think it's like the best and most ideal business in the world, because you can run it as a one-man show, or I can build, there's people who have property management company, Garrett, like you did, with 250 people. I mean, it's a wide spectrum.
You can find ways in these slower industries to make an impact, and you can speed up and become this creative visionary in a certain way, and add maybe your construction, the things you're doing in construction are different than anyone else. So there's ways that you can stand out as well in our industry, even if it is slower moving. We don't have to keep up with the high tech trends that are happening. And that's one way to kind of set you apart, at least in our industry. So
yeah, the other thing I would add is you just can't lose sight of the fact that yes, the industry is a little slower moving, and yes, everything we said, there's an opportunity there that's different than going into high tech. But once you have 100 employees, 200 employees, 300 employees, I mean, it does start to get complex, and it definitely requires a different kind of person than, like you said, somebody with 4 employees. So my client that had 10,000 units, they had 750 employees. It's a complex business, and the gentleman at the helm of that organization was a flaming visionary, incredible visionary. And so I even look at my clients with 1,000 units, 2,000 units, 5,000 units. I mean, every one of those has a true entrepreneur at the top. Maybe not red line, but certainly at least in the middle of the range.
And this has a discussion. You got to be clear what you want, right, Gino? Because you're right. We're like, we want 10,000, no, 20,000, 100,000 units. Yeah, but wait a minute. Are you clear what that means, right? Do you know how complex, how many people in there? And sometimes we just talk about it because we just want to go big. But, I know a guy who's got 860 units. He's making like $75,000 a month. He's like, dude, you guys are nuts. I don't know why I would want that. I have like 4 people that work with me. I'm happy as a clam. I can go surfing anytime I want, right? So you got to be clear about what you want. What kind of entrepreneur do you want to be?
Exactly. And that's what that whole glimpse is about. And again, the beauty, the industry you're in. So now you're just picking the size. You're 100% correct. And when I have to talk to a generic audience, I have to start by saying, being a tech billion-dollar unicorn is not all it's cracked up to be, and that's what most of them want to be. And I'm like, whoa, back up. To start and build a $3 million heating and cooling company that throws up a 20% profit, that ain't all bad. So don't get caught up in the hype of this billion-dollar thing, just like a lot of your audience gets caught up in the 10,000 unit hype.
Why do you think people want to do that? Why are they always trying to go to that range and be the Elon Musk of their industry? Look
at all of the news and media and the magazines. Who's on the cover? That's what you see on the cover. So I don't know that I've ever seen. There's a great quote by Jim Collins that says, the greatest entrepreneur will never know because it's some $10 million company in middle America that doesn't want to be known. Well, we're never going to see that person. And the day I read that quote 23 years ago, I said, I'm building that company, which I did with EOS Worldwide. We didn't want to be known. We didn't need to be known. So you're just never going to see that humble person on a magazine. And so you see these big name billionaires and we get drawn into it. We get sucked into it. And we think that that's the one and only option.
You know what? But I think it's a lot of ego driven as well too. We're like, we need to be bigger, but are we clear what that means? Like, if we don't run a company, if we don't implement EOS properly, if we don't run this right, we're gonna, the wheels are gonna come off, and it's gonna come at the expense of our health and relationships because we want to build this company. But in your time, you've seen a lot of entrepreneurs make lots of mistakes. And one of them is trying to think they're an entrepreneur when they're lacking one of these 6 traits. So besides a misalignment of entrepreneur, what are some of the mistakes that you see people make as they embark on their journey?
Yeah, no, I love that. And then we're in this glimpse part. And so as I mentioned a few minutes ago, what I share in Glimpse is a day in the life, both heaven and hell, the dream and the nightmare. And I'm sharing that contrast because I'm trying to help that entrepreneur in the making understand it is an option and it is avoidable to not live the nightmare. And there are 8 critical mistakes. And so almost every entrepreneur makes these mistakes. I'm going to rip through them really fast. You pick 1 or 2 that you want to drill deeper down on. But this is what mistakes entrepreneurs make almost all the time. Number 1, not having a vision. 2, hiring the wrong people. 3, not spending time with your people. 4, not knowing who your customer is. 5, not charging enough. 6, not staying true to your core. 7, not knowing your numbers. 8, not crystallizing roles and responsibilities.
That's a lot of mistakes right there.
Almost everybody makes them.
we could spend quite a bit on that. I think for me that stood out is not staying true to your core to some degree, because there's some degree of shiny objectitis. On the other hand, there's opportunity that just are really lucrative.
Yeah.
They don't feel quite right, and maybe don't serve your mission, but man, you'd be an idiot not to go down that path. And then sometimes we make these decisions and we take advantage of these opportunities because they're short-sighted and lucrative. I don't know. Is there like a biggest mistake? Is there a top? Gino, pick the number 1 mistake entrepreneurs make.
Well, unfortunately, no, they're all equally weighted. And this is what, again, almost every entrepreneur I work with that I help them go to the next level, they all suffered from these mistakes. So they're equal, but let's pick the one that you pick. And I just want to give your audience an example. So not staying true to your core. And so the classic example is that entrepreneur, again, typically a 10 to 250 person company, privately held. They got so successful that they found themselves in other businesses doing other things. And like you said, they saw shiny stuff, but they don't realize how that's going to distract their focus. Well, to use the apartment industry, let's pretend, because with every one of my apartment clients, we get hyper clear on what type of building are you going after, what is the geography, what is the psychographic of the tenant you're looking for. And to the degree you focus on those kind of properties, you have a very focused model that you can scale. But now let's pretend you don't do that. You don't stay true to core, and you go after A, B, and C properties. You look everywhere in the country. In other words, every place, everywhere is fine. You'll buy a 2-unit building or a 250-unit building. So all of a sudden, that's a buckshot approach to the world. And let's pretend you grow that to 2,000 units. And all of a sudden, you have 25 properties with 4 units, and you get what I'm trying to say. It's just kind of this complex mess where if you'll focus on your core, where do you excel? What is your sweet spot? What are you drawn to? It's going to help you be much more focused, clear, and less complex.
So Gino, I love that. One of the ones that stuck out to me was, and this stems just from a really funny quick story, but hiring the wrong people. So my first hire that I ever made, actually, he was supposed to be a leasing specialist. And so he went and he leased, the first week he leased 10 apartments, and I was super excited. I'm like, wow, he leased 10 apartments. That's crazy. And collected all the money. And then we went to go meet with him to get the money, and he just disappeared. So he took like 10 grand in renter's money. We had to move him in without the deposits. And I didn't even know at that time that you needed to run background checks. He ended up on the news. So later for running the scam on Craigslist. So my point is, how do you, if you're not like a hiring HR, person, how do you find and how do you hire the right people? Because this is such a range of ways to go about this, and how do you kind of narrow that down to find the right people
It's actually a very simple formula. And so where it starts is by understanding the mistake. And the mistake is you as an entrepreneur start your business, reach some level of success, and you need a body now. And the classic mistake is you grab the nearest body to you, your mother, your dad, your brother, your sister, your uncle, your neighbor, your best friend, and you throw them into your business. And a few years later, you find yourself surrounded with all the wrong people because you just kept throwing bodies every time you hit a level of capacity. Well, here's the solution. You need to take a big step back, understanding the hell you're going to be in 4 years, hence the power of glimpse. You need to slow down. First, discover your core values. What are your personal core values in business? Certainly, it's 3 to 7 things that define you as a person. Slow down, slow hire, quick fire. And so slow hire says you now need to find people that possess those core values and certainly have the skill set for what you need them to do. We call that the right person in the right seat. And then forward you go. And if you make the wrong hire, you obviously quick fire, but that's the way to do it.
You know, I'm still learning this right now because I'm super loyal. It's like a strength I have and / a weakness because I hold on to people far too long, and I actually hire kind of quick and fire kind of slow. So I do exact opposite. I'm working on myself on that. Now, having talked about a lot of mistakes in entrepreneurs, but there are some patterns you see with people who are successful. What are some of those traits?
In regards to
entrepreneurship, successful entrepreneurs, keys of success.
Yeah. And so again, I'm going to give you the flip side of this. And actually now you're jumping to path. So since you're going there, I'm just going to take you there. And
Let's
so
go to path.
now that we've confirmed you're an entrepreneur in the making, we've shown you a glimpse, you've chosen the business you're going to go after. So again, in confirm, take the assessment. That's the tool. In glimpse, you would fill out my biz match, but you don't need to because you know you're going to be in the apartment business. Just decide the size you want to build.
Yeah, and the markets. That's a good point.
Exactly. In path, now we're going to show you a path to greatly increase your odds of success, and again, help you avoid a bunch of mistakes. And so, in that part of the book, I teach something called the 8 disciplines for increasing your odds of success. And again, I'll just quickly rip through them. You pick the one that you want to talk about, but it's clarifying your vision. It's deciding if you are a partner person. That's always a fun one. Know that the bigger the problem you solve in the world, the more successful you will be. Number 4, get feedback from customers and clients early and often. Number 5, know that your first plan will not be your final plan. Number 6, work hard, really hard. Number 7, take criticism and doubt from others with a grain of salt. And number 8, see it every night. You know, and so you pick one, but partner person might be a great topic for this audience. But if you think there's one better, then I'm going to shut up and let you pick.
I think that's a great one as well, because in this business, unlike in a single family house world, it's kind of like me, myself, and I. But in multifamily, it's hard. It's very unusual to be a one man or one woman show. And most commonly, there's joint ventures of at least 2 people, sometimes up to 4 to 5, because it allows us, every person in the venture, to play to their strength and at the same time allow greater scale and achieve scale faster. But the problem is, same with employees, sometimes you just don't know. You know, you meet someone at a show, you seem to get along, you seem to have complementary strengths, and you hop in, you do a deal together. But how can you know? First of all, it's about the other person. But I think what you're saying is, are you yourself a partner person? Do you work in a partnership, or do you need to be king and only king? So talk a little bit about that. Are you a partner person?
So, and I'm not talking about investors, okay? Because that's where your business model is a little bit different. And so
I'm not talking about either. I'm talking about active partners in the business. Yeah, absolutely.
So I just don't want your audience to get confused. This isn't about the investors that are part of your business model. This is, who's going to have a stake in your business. And so there are 2 types of people in the world. There are people that should have partners, and there are people that should not have partners, and neither is bad. And there are as many successful in either camp. So you just have to decide, because if you're not a partner person, then you should not have partners, and you're going to be miserable. And 5 years from now, you're going to be unwinding a very ugly business. And I'm telling you, I've been through so many of them, helping my clients, separate from each other. So, but here's what's important to know. Make that decision first. But now let's pretend you decide you're a partner person. There's 2 types of partner people. There's a partner person that wants an equal partner, and there's a partner person that is willing to give equity but maintain controlling interest. And so that's the type of person I am, to use an example. I love giving people equity. I love them having skin in the game. I love them having a piece of the rock, but I'll never give up controlling interest. And so I need to be the final say. I need to make the final decision. And so you just need to know which one you are before you go into starting your business so that you're not unwinding a mess 5 years from now.
Love that. Yeah, it's a unique business. You got to have partners. My first partnership fell apart, and I had a tough time getting back into that mode of partnership. I had to overcome a lot to get back into that.
And you
but
still came back into a new partnership. I'm still amazed about that because I would have been in the corner
know.
sucking my thumb after something like that.
It's funny what you do when you're about to go broke, right?
No, and by the way, I want to say this at this point too. It's really important. When we talked about that entrepreneurial range and the person on the left side of the range, and you didn't score 90 or higher, go partner with someone who's a true entrepreneur, and then it's going to be rocket fuel. It's going to be a match made in heaven. So just know you can still build that empire.
There is hope for someone getting a 70. Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. So, I got to ask you this question because I noticed you really value the great authors, the past authors that maybe people don't read about as much or what they should. So I'm talking about, Napoleon Hill, Jim Collins, Dale Carnegie, all the greats. That's like, you love that, right?
Oh my God, you bet. That's what I grew up on in my 20s.
Yeah, exactly. So you, interestingly, are kind of creating your own version of that now. Do you consider yourself kind of like the modern day version of those greats? Is that what you're trying to do as a part of your legacy, would you say?
I don't consider myself one of those. I don't aspire to be one of those. I'm an introvert and I'm a mad scientist, and I prefer to be in the lab. And building EOS Worldwide for 20 years, I never did a podcast. Okay. I'm doing podcasts. This is like podcast number 70 for this new book. And it's weird. I'm having a blast doing them. And I speak, but I handpick 3 to 5 speaking engagements a year. But no, I don't aspire. My ego does not need to be the big name, the big face, the guru. So to me, I'm a teacher. And, I teach through books, and I certainly teach live on occasion, but whatever that turns into, listen, I'm having a blast at this exact moment, and I know I'm impacting lives. So I just want to impact lives, whatever that turns into. We've got 100,000 companies running on EOS. I would have kind of expected that, but never 100,000, maybe 10,000. So no, that does nothing for my ego. I don't need it. And when I finish this next project, this is a 10-year project, Entrepreneur Leap, I'm going to go create the next thing that's going to help a bunch more people. And whatever that means, it means. I really don't care about the accolades.
Well, you clearly have a boundless energy, Gino, and I love that. It's some people just have, as a one-hit wonders. You are not. So, how can people connect with you, and remind people again where they can get that assessment as well and the book?
So the epicenter of all things Entrepreneurial Leap is the website e-leap.com. That's where they can buy the book. That's where they can take the assessment. There's also a free chapter they can download just to read the first 30 pages and see if you fall in love with it and keep going. The other thing I would throw out there too, on the website, there's a Become a Collaborator button. And what that is it's for anybody out there that loves to teach, coach, mentor, guide other entrepreneurs. I give you all of my content to just go teach and help and spawn more entrepreneurs. And so if that's a side passion of yours, I urge you to click on that Become a Collaborator button as well.
That's awesome. I just love your passion and your mission to help entrepreneurs. So thanks so much for being on the show today, Gino.
My pleasure.
Man, that's some good stuff, Garrett. But here's the thing. I just don't know if I buy it. The fact that you're just born as an entrepreneur, and if not, you're not. Like, I find that hard to believe because, shoot, I'm an educator.
The funny thing is that I was like questioning myself. I'm like, was I really born with this? And then I'm like, man, I don't know, maybe I was. So it's definitely tests you a little bit as a person in general. And I definitely think that there's a spectrum. It's very interesting to see his take and to read into the different traits that create a true entrepreneur. and how that works.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I think on the one hand, it's there to talk people out of something that they're just going to be banging their head against the wall, which is people who are on the left spectrum and they really want to be on the right spectrum. But on the other hand, you know, here's the thing for me personally, I didn't discover I was an entrepreneur until I was my mid 30s. I was always an employee. My dad was IBM for 35 years. I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was and whether it existed. Now, had I read this book and I looked at the 6 traits in there, you know, the visionary, passionate, driven, risk taker, responsible, problem solver, and then read his glimpse chapter, I would have been like, holy moly, he's talking about me, but I had no idea. So I think the book will talk some people out of being an entrepreneur, but I think also it'll talk people into being an entrepreneur, and maybe they didn't think they were.
I think that's just providing that kind of transparency, I think was a big goal of that book in general. And, you know, he's just been doing this for so long that you know that this isn't just like he mentioned, it's not a theory. He's gone into these data points over years and years of time to come up with these traits. He didn't just think of it and it goes in a book. He's like tested it over and over again. So it's something that definitely, knowing that you know, it's kind of come from that kind of a source, makes it even more interesting.
It really does, because he's not some kind of academic that wrote some kind of Harvard Business Review. You know, he's worked with so many entrepreneurs, seen people fail and succeed. So when he has these 6 traits, the 8 mistakes, and the whatever, you're like, oh my gosh, like you got to pay attention to these things, because they're based on actual experiences that people have had.
I think everybody that is an entrepreneur, or maybe if they're on the other side of the spectrum, they've gone through something like that's kind of crafted them. That's what he talked about as well, is that there's usually like this really big down moment that helps kind of define who you are. And a lot of times just in life in general, that's true. If you think of any time that you were, you know, you learned the most or became something different, it didn't happen from those major positive times. It was something detrimental that kind of forced you in that direction. And I love that he talked on that and how that kind of plays into things. So I'm sure you've had the same, Michael.
Well, you know, people they want to know about your successes. You know, I get asked, what's your best deal? And I'm thinking to myself, it's kind of a dumb question, because you don't really learn a lot from your good deals. Like, you don't. You learn the most from deals that didn't go well. That's where you learn the most from. And I've had plenty of those. I'm sure you have as well.
The best one, I'll keep it short. One of the best ones was a 50 unit that I had in south side of Chicago. And the entire tenant base, they didn't have real jobs. They had hustler jobs. And the entire building was on a steam boiler. So right after we bought it, the steam boiler was broken, and it would blast heat. It'd be 150 degrees in some people's apartments in the middle of winter, and others would have no heat at all. And so you'd see windows open with just heat blasting out the side, and people were getting calls about it. And we looked, the first month we had that property, we looked at the gas bill, and it was like $30,000 on a 50 unit. And the revenue, I think, was like 12,000. So we were, that was a big learning lesson for me right away. And so, extremely, you know, I could tell you a million of those stories.
Well, when you started with Southside, I already knew that was going as well. It's like, holy moly. So you've had me at Southside, but you know, but that's the thing. People are, you know, afraid of making mistakes, and it's not only a necessary part of being an entrepreneur. It's actually, that's how you grow. And I used to be afraid of making mistakes, because I was a W-2 employee for so long. And until I realized, oh my gosh, it's not a mistake. It's an opportunity to grow, to get better. And because of my quote mistakes, I am, you know, who I am right now. Had I, you know, before that point, I'd never really failed at anything. But who was I as a person, as an entrepreneur? I was an employee making $100,000 a year, and that's all I was going to be at the time. And you know, I just really wasn't living life to the fullest. And I thought I was. And when I was reading books like Napoleon Hill or Carnegie, like you mentioned, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to push myself further. And in order to do that, you got to put yourself out there a little bit.
If you think about the definition of safety, everybody's like, oh, you know, if I want to go do a job because it's safe. Okay. But you can get fired in an economic downturn. To me, that's not safe. I'd rather bet on myself over betting on some boss that I had that maybe doesn't like me, or maybe they do, but then the company goes sideways. And so I think that changing your perspective on that alone can have a great impact, and couple it with reading this guy's book or his books. I mean, man, you could be off on a really cool adventure.
Well, we're off looking for our next deal, Garrett, Nighthawk Equity, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. If you're interested in investing outside the stock market and you consider real estate syndication, we'd love to have a conversation with you. Head over to nighthawkequity.com and click the join button to join our investment club. You'll fill out a short form. You'll have a conversation with us, and then and then we can show you one of our upcoming opportunities that we're working on right now. We'd love to have you on board, so check that out as well. Really great having you here on the show. Hope you guys were inspired by Gino and enjoyed Garrett and I's banter. Catch you guys next time. Hey, and before you leave, make sure you subscribe to my channel below. We put out videos every single week, and you don't want to miss it. Also, if you haven't done so already, grab my free ebook here, okay? It's a secret to raising money to buy your first apartment building deal. It's a good one, so grab that. And hey, check out another video.